On this episode of News Flash, we'll tell you the latest about how the candidates are dealing with the wildfires. Both of them were in California today. Sanders urges Biden to do more to excite young voters. Democrats versus the Delaware way. AstraZeneca raises prices, and a Joe Rogan moderated debate was in the cards today. Although, don't get your hopes up. It's probably never going to happen. But it would be quite something. I got a lot of great stuff to talk to you about today. And we're going to be doing it right now. And, of course, we start with this whole thing with the wildfires today. They are continuing to rage across the West Coast. Joe Biden on Monday attacked Trump's record on climate change. And, again, this is, I think, something that we're going to really have to be looking at as people, or I know I'm going to have to be looking at. I couldn't speak for anybody else listening to this, but, I mean, looking at this election, it's so hard to really feel confidence in either of these people, because while one is objectively worse, especially with really these two issues, really mostly, and I think with most other issues you can make a case, even some incremental change is good. If you make a lot of incremental change in the right direction, it's very, very good. But I really think with climate change and with healthcare, those two issues, the biggest two issues that our country faces today, I think that people care about and that people vote on. Climate change and healthcare, two very hot button issues, which really, hot button really in that one of them completely denies the existence of climate change. It really has to be all or nothing, right? You have to do something like the Green New Deal, or possibly even more extreme if we have any hope of having a somewhat livable planet for future generations. And with healthcare, you got to provide it to everybody, or you have a system, a patchwork system, a quilt of just middlemen and bills and processing fees and nightmarish experiences in general throughout. And that, to me, at least, sounds like a lot like the American healthcare system. But this is really, I think, a great encapsulation of Joe Biden, because he will come out there and say all these things. Joe Biden's or President Trump's a climate arsonist. He is making this situation worse, really calling out for him. And by the way, saying stuff 100% true. He is a climate arsonist. He's making the situation worse. This is incredibly destructive, incredibly damaging rhetoric that really has an effect and makes the discourse in this country worse in an area where it really cannot get any worse if we really care about making change or any kind of action. But I think it really shows that you're not going to get too much better with Biden either. Like, sure, he, in the platform committee, limited his time that it would take from him to go to carbon neutral from 2050 to 2030. But still, in no way will fracking be banned under my watch. That's what he always says. Deeply tied to fossil fuel with his fundraising, with his campaign team even. You are not going to, and still his climate change plan, it's not the Green New Deal. It's not close to the Green New Deal. There are some of the same elements in there. But, if there's any kind of hope of a real renaissance on climate, a real shift in the right direction on climate, it's not going to be coming from Joe Biden, because he is not that kind of candidate. He's not that kind of candidate in any issue. But when you're really not that kind of candidate in an issue like climate change, it really has a big effect. So Biden was speaking in Delaware, and this was really one of the first times that he directly connected the blazes that have displaced thousands of people to climate change. And I think, which is a kind of an important thing to do in American minds, of course, like you may think, listening to the show, if you're maybe more politically active, that these fires could be directly associated with climate change. That is the kind of scientific consensus, but I'm not entirely sure, like, how widespread that belief is. Like, I'm not super confident in that. Like, oh yeah, people are going out there, but like, oh, these wildfires, like they know that these wildfires are in large part due to climate change, kind of the more extreme weather events causing this and making it more likely that these wildfires, which, I mean, they happen almost every year, but not nearly to this degree. So, yeah, that is a big, big part of this situation. So, if we have 4 more years of Trump's climate denial, how many suburbs will be burned in wildfires, Biden asked? How many suburban neighborhoods will have been flooded out? How many suburbs will have been blown away in superstorms? I mean, it's a very, very good question, but could the same be said if we have 4 more years of Biden's climate policy? With the Paris Climate Accords, that was the best that Obama Biden could come up with, and sure, of course, he's going to do a little bit more than that. I mean, at least he says he will. But, like, no one can say with a straight face that he is going to be the candidate who is going to do anywhere near the kind of action that we need on climate change to make a real difference. So it really engenders, I think, anybody looking at this in a semi-rational way, like a sense of deep hopelessness, especially about this issue. Like, is this what we're bound to every year? Like, are we going to see massive wildfires? Or when we see colors of California becoming orange? I mean, it's happening in other states, like Idaho, going through the same thing. And, I mean, it's not encouraging. It's really not encouraging in any way, because, like, what does this say when we are looking at a continuing crisis? And there seems to be, like, really, at the beginning of the pandemic, I heard a great kind of, a few people were saying this. I know Naomi Klein, great person to follow if you're not following them already. She was talking about how there was this quote from Milton Friedman that's like, you go based on the ideas, in a crisis, that's mostly when real change happens, and the change comes from the ideas that are quote-unquote lying around. And when it comes to climate, we are definitely in a climate crisis, have been in one for a while. I mean, the word crisis is used so often now, it's almost lost all its meaning, right? But we are definitely in a climate crisis. And what are the ideas that are lying around? Are they anywhere near the change that scientists and people who really know and have studied this stuff say we need to be? It's a good question. I don't think so. I mean, I don't see any kind of those ideas, any kind of proposals in the mainstream political, like, discourse that would rise to this proposal. Of course, the Green New Deal, it's out there, but again, Joe Biden, I mean, is so far away from it. You don't really know what's going to happen here. So, yeah, he continued, if you give the climate arsonist 4 more years in the White House, why would anyone be surprised if we have 4 more years of America ablaze? So he delivered the speech outdoors in the Delaware Museum of Natural History in Wilmington. It came as Trump traveled to California to meet with Gavin Newsom and other officials for a briefing on the devastating wildfires. So Trump has come under intense criticism for failing to, for several weeks, to mention the places that have ravaged parts of California, Oregon, and Washington. The president, who has called climate change a hoax, has frequently expressed skepticism about the scientific consensus that warming global temperatures are worsening wildfires. Campaigning in Nevada this weekend, Trump suggested forest management was to blame, and in August he threatened to withhold federal aid for California for not listening to his suggestions for managing forests. It's just like, yeah, you guys who are like, again, this is the idiocy, and this is really just the great charm of Trump, just like going to people who have done their jobs kind of like successfully for many, many years. That there's like it is an established field of study, an established method of practice that has been proven to work from time to time, or for over a long period of history, and be like, no, you got to do it this way. Why? Because it helps my political purposes, and I think I kind of know what I'm doing, and yeah, that's you got to do it this way now. Like, I mean, come on. Like, this is just absolutely a joke, and I think so many people, like, really, especially in Nevada, see through it, or in California, see through it at this point. So this is a little clip from the briefing that Gavin Newsom and Trump had today, talking, of course, about the wildfires and other things, and apparently there was some disagreement, especially over
your administration just entered into a first-type commitment over the next 20 years to double our vegetation management and forest management. Right. I want to thank you for supporting that effort. funding that effort. We acknowledge our role and responsibility to do more in that space. But one thing is fundamental. 57% of the land in this state is federal forest land. 3% is California. So we really do need that support.
Which is really the best part of it, because like he's the problem, the forest management problem is coming from inside the house. And it's really it's not as much of a forest management problem as it is, of course, a climate change problem. Like that the reason why, I mean, the forest management changes haven't really, like the forest management practices haven't really changed over the past few years, or especially this year. Like, I mean, there was a bad year in 2018, not as bad year in 2019, and bad year in 2020. Like the forest fire practices have been the same the whole time. But the thing is, there are other conditions, other external factors that are causing the forest treatment practices to become more of a problem. And this is presumably what Newsom is going to talk to Trump about here.
Need that emphasis of engagement, and we are fully committed to working with you to advance that cause. We've known each other too long, and as you suggest, the working relationship.
Fun fact here. Gavin Newsom used to be married to the current, I believe, fiance or wife or girlfriend of Donald Trump Jr., Kimberly Guilfoyle, which is kind of insane.
Relationship I value. We obviously feel very strongly that the hots are getting hotter, the dries are getting drier. When we're having heat domes, the likes of which we've never seen in our history, the hottest August ever in the history of the state, the ferocity of these fires, the drought, 5+ years, losing 163 million trees to that drought. Something's happened to the plumbing of the world. And we come from a perspective, humbly, where we submit the science is, in and observed evidence is self-evident, that climate change is real, and that is exacerbating this. And so I think there's an area of at least commonality on vegetation, forest management, but please respect, and I know you do, the difference of opinion out here as it relates to this fundamental issue.
It's kind of insane that just like we have a situation where the state is ablaze, and the governor of the state has to go to be like, this problem that's clearly causing this problem, the thing that's clearly causing this to happen that you want to address, that you want to like pretend isn't happening, but is clearly a problem that we need to solve and work towards. And again, I'm sure Gavin Newsom isn't that great on climate change either, but the fact that he has to go up to Donald Trump and be like, yeah, if you respectfully, we know you get, it's like they're almost sad to have to say it to him that this objectively real fact that's causing all these problems is real, and it's not very encouraging. Yeah, so. Yeah, Gavin Bill. Oh, climate change is real. It doesn't look particularly good. But also in election news, Wisconsin's top court rejects the reprinting of ballots, avoiding election chaos and possibly helping Joe Biden. They ruled the Green Party's presidential candidate will not appear on the state's ballot, a decision that came as a sigh of relief to election officials who were worried that a wholesale reprinting of thousands of ballots could be bring chaos to an already stressed electoral system. The decision against the candidate, Howie Hawkins, also could provide a small but potentially significant lift to Joe Biden, whose Democratic allies had expressed concern that the president of a third-party progressive candidate on the ballot could siphon votes away from Biden and help President Trump. Of course, this belies the fact that there is another option that Biden could campaign and could draw progressives towards him and actually come get their vote. You know who's been saying that recently? Bernie Sanders. That leads us perfectly into our next story, and it's going to be by Sydney Ember here in the New York Times. When Senator Bernie Sanders dropped out of the presidential race in early April, he vowed that the progressive movement he championed would carry on. And while at nearly every turn he's encouraged his supporters to unite behind Joe Biden, the Democratic nominee, he and others in the party's left wing have tried to nudge the former vice president toward the more of the policy goals his movement supports. And I don't think he's been successful so far. I think it's going to be very, very tough for him to be successful, at least until the moment arises in a possible Biden administration, where we would see a chance for kind of manipulation here. So in recent days, he has been sounding more direct notes of caution to